Welcome to the Hill of Justice Live. We are here. We have a returning guest, obviously, but before we even get that going, for those who are on right now, if you can go ahead and give us a chat to see if we were able to, if you can hear us and see us clearly on that end of it. So, as you know, this is a live show, so technical difficulties is part of the game here. And all right, we
We're good.
are we are doing pretty good.
All
So,
right, Jerome, I
brother,
guess I'll open up a little bit.
yeah, why don't you do that?
So we got some interesting developments, and I think you got a picture you'll put up in a second. But finally, the news has done something about the rest of the two officers. Remember, this show uh, that we're there. You go, right there. This show was centered around a mother that called me and said that she felt her son was in danger and kept calling me, and then eventually one of her sons dialed 911 saying, "Go get to my son. Can you send a car to check on my brother? I believe that his life is in danger." Well, allegedly his life was in danger because he had some involvement with these two people here concerning drugs. One is a sergeant for the K9 on the left hand side. The other one is an officer. I'm not sure what her rank is or whatever. Maybe she's a sergeant. And he's a K9 officer, if I remember correctly. So that was the basis for this show. Well, we're going to pivot a little bit because there's been some interesting developments. Okay, for the first time, it's getting to the news. Remember, all of this has been going on. An inmate has been killed. No one from the sheriff's office said anything. And it probably wasn't until this show came out and I did some polls and some people confirmed that they did a little 30-second clip it. And then, of course, when we talked about this lady, then now all of a sudden this is coming out. So allegedly, the news is supposed to do something on this today or tomorrow. Not only that, allegedly, there's been another arrest made today, something focusing around the kitchen. So we're going to pivot and come back with something bigger and better because it appears that the drugs in the jail goes deeper or higher up than we could ever think about. And there's some dots we're going to connect and pivot from actually talking to that mother today until that situation, until something else is revealed, especially about the alleged arrest that was made today. Now, with that being said, while all of that's going on, Derrick Groves get captured. And where does he get captured? Here in Atlanta. And not only is he captured here in Atlanta, he just happens to get captured in the 5th Congressional District, where I just happen to be running for Congress from. And as I've told you and I've said to the public, if you look at all of the gun violence, all of the crime and everything else, that seems to all be centered in the 5th Congressional District if you want to look at congressional districts. So the 5th Congressional District has the most gun violence. It has the most homelessness. It has the most uh, issues with mental health turned violent, like what we saw happen at the CDC. But now, for some reason, a national known escapee, where does he choose to hide? Right here in Atlanta in the 5th Congressional District. So we want to get into that. We got our guest from last time, Walker, back, who's going to give us a little bit of insight on these two officers and Derrick Groves. And I guess before we get started, is there a video you want to show with Derrick Groves, and then we'll start talking to former Clayton County officer Walker. He's still in law enforcement, but former Clayton County officer, and then we can start to tie these issues because they're both connected to out of control jails.
All right, let's take a look at this.
All right.
And breaking this afternoon, we have more now on the capture of Derrick Groves, the inmate who has been on the run since May. Good afternoon. I'm John Snell.
And I'm Meg Gatto. Groves was the last of 10 inmates who escaped from the Orleans Justice Center on May 16th. So almost 5 months now he has been on the run. We understand that he was captured at a home in Southwest Atlanta, captured with the help of U.S. Marshals from New Orleans, information gleaned from Crime Stoppers and a Southeast Regional Fugitive Task Force that was helping in his capture here this afternoon. Again, he's been at large for nearly 5 months. Groves is 31 years old. He was serving a life sentence for second-degree murder, convicted last year for a Mardi Gras block shooting that killed 2 people and wounded others. He was described at the time by the Orleans District Attorney's Office as a cold-blooded killer with a history of violent crime. Again, he was the last of 10 inmates who had escaped back in May on the 16th, captured this afternoon at a home in Atlanta.
And this is a live picture coming now from the southern part of Atlanta of the scene. Our understanding is that, you know, this news spread pretty quickly, so this will be a scene that will be breaking soon. What the Marshal Service said, and we don't have a lot yet at this point, Meg, but what the Marshal Service said was that he had been found, quote, hiding elusively. So apparently, you know, playing a game of hide and seek and losing it, as it turns out, with police after this. At first, it was reported as a standoff. They're not really calling it a standoff. So we want to be careful here that we don't get ahead of ourselves, because we don't know the circumstances entirely beyond, you know, the tip and where it goes from there.
But they are describing it as a several-hour search. So, you know, hypothetically, they got a tip that he was in this area. They honed in on one particular house in this area, and then for several hours were searching for him, and they were able to apprehend him. What
Correct. So give you a little bit more context about what happened. Groves, it was not a standoff. It was basically Groves inside the home, got a tip from Crime Stoppers in Louisiana that led to this home in Georgia. He is in the home and he's in a crawl space, deep in the crawl space. And they had to go ahead and flush him out on that. As you know, he was convicted for murder in 2024. And if you remember, it was during a Mardi Gras block party, and he killed 2 people and wounded several others. So this is the last individual that's been caught. I think it's deeply concerning as we take a look at this. We're thankful that he's the last remaining fugitive that's now been captured, but at the same time, and we're about to talk about this, you don't get to that. You don't get to 4 or 5 months as an escapee without some help. You have a plethora of help and resources that are coming your way. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today.
So I tell you what, let's do this. Let's hear from the young blood, and let's get his opinion, the future of law enforcement. Okay, first, we got 2 officers at the Clayton County Jail where I used to be the sheriff, where he used to work at. One is a K-9 officer. They're both arrested. It's just being put on the news. We're the ones that probably really put this information out, that they were arrested ahead of time. Again, it's connected to an inmate that said he was in fear of his life because of these people. And now the situation has gotten so crazy that we need to pivot before we bring out the information that's coming in today. And then, of course, we're dealing with another out-of-control jail in New Orleans, which is how we ended up with a dangerous fugitive right here in Atlanta. Let's hear it from the future of law enforcement before we weigh in and get your perspective, because you were and still on the front lines of being in a jail. Break these 2 cases down for us, young man.
So the first case with the 2 officers, well, here at Clayton County, you know, it's just a matter of time before, you know, six inmates or 14 inmates, how many ever run out the back door here at Clayton with the folks he's hiring. But, you know, all this boiled down to jails. These guys, and even the guys that's getting away, that got caught, the Derrick guy. It's boiled down to the officer, the leadership, or this weak leadership that's in these jails. The sheriffs, people are trying to be more, you know, as what they call it now, woke. You know, hire people with, you know, as you can see her, you know, no experience. You know, didn't go through proper training, and they put these people straight down into the jail, and they, you know, they easily manipulated. And the leadership is even manipulated. So, you know, like I said, I'm surprised these folks ain't ran out of Clayton back door yet.
Well, it's been about 4 or 5 escapes. I think maybe 4. Right. Right. They didn't all run out at the same time. And the interesting part is 2 or 3 of them were murderers.
Right.
Actually, 3 were murderers.
Yeah.
Right.
and which that didn't make it out, from the hospital how it's supposed to. The public didn't know that, the officer fell asleep, and he actually got off the bed, walked to the officer, took her keys, and they fired the officer, whatever. But nobody knew this officer never even been to jailer school. This officer never went through any training. She was hired, and she was put in a jail, and then sent to a hospital with a murderer or whatever his charges were. But I know he was a violent guy to do that. So just go back to show, man. This is weak leadership in New Orleans. This is weak leadership in Clayton County, and this is going to continue to happen until it changes.
Let me ask you this question. In the article on from Channel 2, and we all know how accurate they are, and no pun intended, right. But it says at the end that the sheriff has made a promise to the citizens that he will clean up the jail. Bennett said, whoever Bennett is, the arrest of Lewis and Allen, the arrest of Lewis Allen and Branch highlight ongoing efforts by the Clayton County Sheriff's Office to address corruption within the jail. Now, I know for a fact from talking to the mother and listening to some of these tapes that she played for me that they wouldn't even have known these two were selling drugs if it wasn't for her calling and complaining, hey, I think someone's going to hurt my son. And because of that, he ended up telling them about these officers and they found it out. So it's not like they had some operation going on. So that's a very, very deceptive statement there. But if it wasn't for her in fear of his life, or he wasn't in fear of his life, there wouldn't have been all of this stuff, the 911 call or anything, and these two would still be selling drugs.
Right. So
I guess what I'm trying to ask you is this. You were there. You saw how much stuff was getting into jail. How far up or how far down do you think this goes?
So listen to this. This is for the folks. If LaVonka was truly trying to clean up the jail, these folks would have been posted to Nixle. The 10-something officer that was arrested in the last 2 months would have been posted to Nixle. On the 30th of last month, he posted his wife town hall meeting in a Nixle, in the Clayton County Sheriff's Office, public paid for a Nixle, that somebody that's not attached to the Clayton County Sheriff's Office having a town hall meeting. He posted that on there, but when this inmate was beat to death, who was in jail for criminal damage or misdemeanor, when he was beat to death by another inmate, the public wasn't aware. When these two officers arrested, the public wasn't aware. So he told the news that he's trying his effort to clean up the jail. Why not you let the public know or who you're arresting? Why has it been kept a secret? And to be honest with you, the internal investigation team is, totally separate from him. They do their own thing. These guys are arrested by a captain that, I know, and, he hates corruption. So he's locking these guys up. But the sheriff is not doing any efforts to try to clean up the jail because he'll stop hiring these folks. Emails and text messages long before these people become corrupt. You can start to tell before these folks go to actually bringing in the dope. And this one guy here was trusted with a canine that supposed to be sniffing out dope. And the whole time while he's sniffing dope, he was the one having it in his own pockets. And they weren't able to catch on. So it's multiple officers. It's an officer there now that has multiple allegations of bringing dope in. They were handcuffed in the kitchen in front of inmates. And because of a personal relationship, they still allowed to work there. So these two was arrested because of, who knows, something personal. But I do know for a fact, this female officer here, when everybody else is arrested, they go to the infirmary because their officer there, they have to be put on protective custody. Well, I was told this female came in here talking crazy to LaVon Allen. So she was threw down in the housing unit with the females where she worked for embarrassment, which what should happen, she should be put in a cell for safety, but I think she should be embarrassed. But every other officer was put in the infirmary. She was threw down the hallway. So I believe they just, didn't go with the flow, or they didn't pay their bill to him to allow drug, they didn't cash out him to allow drugs to come in. So, he had to either accept payment or lock him up. That's what I think happened here.
Okay, let me ask you this. So we got an inmate a few days ago that was murdered. He was struck. He died. Okay. Nothing came out on that till about a couple of days later after the media checked, I guess, after getting a tip or either watching our media, our social media.
Right.
So my understanding is somebody has been charged with the murder, but what's your opinion? We don't know who it is. No, there was no resolution. No one said, okay, well, we know who did it. This is the person who's been charged. Here's their picture, like they putting these two people's picture up. This is the person who has been charged with the murder of this, and this is the scenario. No, nothing from the media, nothing from the sheriff's office.
Right.
Why is that? Why is it that we don't report an arrest of an inmate that was murdered and who murdered him? What's your thoughts of why that's not being reported?
My thoughts is, you know, it's obvious, you know, he's trying to hide it from the public. You know, he's not answering any open records requests from the news. That's why it's taking so long from the news to get any information to publish it, because he's refusing the law, which, you know, give him 3 days to make records accessible to the public. And you know, like when the guy died.
So wait, hold on a second. You say he's not answering open records requests from the news. Okay, now you know some stuff that I'm interested in. What news has been giving them open records requests on what? How do you know this?
So when Channel 2 or no, this was Atlanta News First, say they sent information to on this death here. They haven't received anything back from these two officers. At first, it was originally reported to them by other officers that was that two officers was arrested hours after they was arrested, and they said they submitted information to hear back from the sheriff's office. And Atlanta News First still haven't posted it, so I'm assuming they still haven't got none. But I personally have sent open records requests for some things that haven't been answered, and I know a couple other people that have sent open records requests.
Yeah, I want to go ahead and let everybody know the one way to get around an open records request is just to say, and many institutions do this, is to say that there's an open investigation going on.
Right.
And that's how to go ahead and thwart that. And it's time to true and tested all over industry, all over the world. Right. This is what happens often.
But see, he won't even do that. You know, the law states that he must give a response in 3 days, whether he can do it or he can't.
Right.
You know, he won't.
And he's not even informing that. That's what you're saying. Right.
Right. And so an email, you know, he can say, "Oh, I didn't see my email." Well, you know, I text him and he responded to the text saying that he would check into the incident that I sent. So, you know, for the state attorney's office that I will be seeing here in a minute, you know, he's blatantly just disobeying the law and it's crazy to me that you know they came after who they came after, you know, to Sheriff Hill, but the guy where multiple people are injured, multiple people are dying, and parents are crying for help. You know, they acting blind, our DA and the news as well.
How deep do you think, and you don't have to, and we probably don't need to say any names, but how deep, based on you being in there and seeing the contraband that was coming in, how deep do you think this drug thing goes, or how high up do you think it goes? Because that's a lot of drugs in that jail. I mean, a lot of people contacted me, we haven't even discussed the overdoses that have happened in that jail. Right. And it hasn't been on the news, but you know, and like I said, there's one guy, and I think it'll be interesting to get him on the show. He contacted me immediately when he got out and said that he and another guy had to go to the infirmary because they were breathing in the dope and they got sick from it. That's a lot of drugs in there. And it's real interesting to me how we go from zero drugs to a wave of it. And that's why I'm asking, you were there. How far do you think this goes? You think it's just an isolated thing with these two, or you think it's more involved?
So I'm going to send you an email here that you can send, and if you want to put up, you can. But while I was there, I have sent multiple emails on shakedowns, or we need shakedowns, or just for instance, we took a inmate. We watched the inmate. We figured out he was selling dope. With multiple inmates. We took this inmate's stuff. We put it in a tower. We made copies of all his legal work and gave him the copy of his legal work and not the real legal work. Because what they do with the real legal work is soak it in fentanyl or whatever, and then they cut strips and sell it. And so that's what the strips are. We made copies of his legal work, gave him his actual legal work. And I sent an email to Chief Green and the entire command staff, sheriff, and everybody that let's make this. Any lawyer that's coming in, they need to make a copy of the legal work, and we give the inmate the copy of the legal work, not the original paper, because we don't know what she dealt with that paper outside. That was refused. I said that we need to go into the hole and take all property that is not a blanket, a mat, legal work, a copy of legal work, and essential items, and take it and move everything else. You know, they were taking the paper books out of the paper and smoking them. But I sent the email asking to take that. That was refused. I sent multiple emails and text messages for shakedowns, asking for assistance for dogs for shakedowns. That was refused. So you asked me how I think it goes up. I think it goes right to Clayton 1, which is the radio sign for the elected sheriff here in Clayton County. I believe he gets this is my opinion, that he gets paid to allow drugs to flow through the jail. And the ones that don't pay, they end up like these two here. You know, it's impossible. I had multiple officers that say, "Hey, Sheriff, can we put a dog at checkpoint?" You know, and that was refused. You know, "Hey, Sheriff," I told him, "can we run dogs in the parking lot around these people's cars? If marijuana smell hit on these folks' cars, that tell you what you need to know." That was refused. So if you ask me where do I think it is, I think it's at the very top. And just for instance, you know, what I call fanned out, how fanned out he is. And one of the reasons is named LaBanca to me. These rappers come into jail. You know, Boss Man D-Lo was booked into the jail. You know, his colonel come running down the hallway. I put this rapper in the hole. I put him in the hole for his safety. And he was a high profile person. I put him in the hole. He was disrespecting officers on the road, you know, so he went in the hole until he bonded out. Well, they came running down there, whispering in his ear and this and this and that. And this guy was OR'd out of the jail. Where you and your family, to the citizens of Clayton County, you know, your family that don't have millions of dollars got to pay the bond. But a guy with millions of dollars, and because, you know, LeBron's a fanboy, you know, this guy get the OR bond out. And that's not just one instance. There's multiple instances of gang members that have came into jail or for aggravated assault, cousins and family members that came in and barbers of him that came in with aggravated assault charges or dope charges, and they get OR'd out onto the streets. You know, while me and your family has to pay a bond. So, you know, if you ask me where I think the corruption starts at, I think it starts right up there with dope boy, you know, LeBanca. So that's where I think the corruption is at.
Yeah, good call.
All right. So, you know, another interesting thing that was sent to me by the mother in this incident before we pivot to Derrick Groves is some text messages that took place between this female officer, Allen, and her son. And one of those text messages, she sends him a picture barely clad. I mean, very barely clad. I don't even know if we could show this up here if I send it to Jerome or not. And it was obviously, you know, there's got to be a reason you're sending a picture like that to an inmate. And that was very, very interesting in itself. Did you observe anything there that you saw female officers that you thought were engaged in any type of sexual relationships with inmates?
Oh yeah. So now officers, you know, not really officers. They, you know, they could walk around so they could be secretive, but security specialists, yes. He's for one, I was running the hole, and from 2 to 10, I was running from 2 to 10. I stepped from 6 to 2 to run 2 to 10 while officer was in mandate. And I had locked the floor down, whatever, walked away real quick. When I came back, inmates was out in the day room. Well, I see a flashlight flashing in the tower, and these inmates take back off into their cell. I walk into the tower and I ask her, "Hey, who's the inmates out in the day room?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. I wasn't looking." Well, mind you, I just saw a flashlight flash notifying these guys I was walking through the backslide. So I walk in and I basically call the lieutenant, tell him what was going on. You know, this lady here is corrupt. And, you know, so that goes to show the corruption. But, you know, the sergeant, you can see some sergeants or female officers, you know, inmate will make a compliment and then they'll throw it off and let that inmate know it's not cool. And then you'll see some that make a compliment and, you know, they eat it up or what the inmates call eat it up, or they take it like, you know.
Correct.
And then you see multiple other times where, you know, we'll tase an inmate, and or, you know, she know that inmate is wrong, but she's vouching for this inmate, or we go to read her witness statement, it's in favor of this inmate when he was obviously wrong. Another thing I didn't speak about last time is, you know, CPU8, the system that we use, not only are the inmate information in that system, but the officer information in that system. And the officer information is in this system, and a lot of times inmates will use officers' address and name to scare them to bring stuff in. I know a 19-year-old, he said he got scared because they knew his address. Well, they knew mine too, and I went to school with a lot of half of the people. And I told him one day, you know, I was gonna be the sheriff. You're gonna know where I drive in and stay. You know, I just don't be a coward. Come to the house when I'm there. That's what I used to always tell the inmates. But the officers would sell the information to the inmates to use as leverage to bring stuff in. So the relationships, and then like I told you before, Sheriff Hill, a lot of the inmates that get out of jail, and then you go look on Instagram, and the female is posted up with this inmate.
Right.
So it's prominent. It's prominent around. It's natural.
Right. Let me say this before we pivot over to Derrick Groves, and I sent y'all that picture so y'all can see that it matches her. And this is the text message between the inmate that gave her up for bringing drugs in. That's not the type of picture I think you know. One thing I used to always do when I was sheriff, and I would put these things out immediately, reminding everyone that inmates are not our friends. So there's a difference between treating people fair and being on a friend basis with them. I don't mean you can't say how you doing or whatever, but when you start having conversations with inmates that go beyond professionalism, this is what you're supposed to be doing, this and that, then you see these relationships develop, and then the line gets crossed. You know, are you an officer and this is an inmate, or are y'all friends or girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever like that? It's almost like, in some ways, like being a parent. It's a difference. You know, you're either going to be the parent or you're going to be the friend. And that's why I've never been a fan of children calling their mother by the first name. I mean, that's your mother. So if you call her by her first name, now it puts y'all two on the same level. So, I mean, what are y'all supposed to do? Go to the club together, smoke weed together? That doesn't make sense. And so when you see these type of relationships develop, and folks are talking about, well, they're just human too. We're not saying they're not human. We're not saying don't be fair or don't be polite. But there's a difference between being fair and polite and being on a friendly basis. Because once an inmate thinks he's your friend, then that means he thinks you're cool. And there's a reason cool rhymes with fool. Anytime I hear an inmate or a criminal say this cop or this guy is cool, that usually means they think he's a fool and we can bring in contraband or we can commit crimes because he's cool. He ain't going to do nothing about it. So cool, and the outline of where cool rhymes with fool. If they tell me, hey, this officer's cool, the sheriff is cool, it means we're dealing with a fool. Because they feel comfortable that you're not going to enforce the law with them.
Well, I guess, I've been knew this, but if, you know, we're speaking on that, then I guess our sheriff is a fool. You know, I think if he was working down in the jail every day, I think he would have been put something in his pockets and brought something in too, because a lot of the inmates actually called him from the county phone, and he pushed 5 and answer and tell him what needs to happen and what he needs to do. So, you know,
and let me guess, they call him Levon, they don't call him sheriff.
Right. Yeah. If we give our inmate our number, you know, or let's just say at the jail I'm at now that's ran by the sheriff, if I gave my number to an inmate, you know, that's the same thing as you bringing dope in. So if you go back to where do I think the corruption started at, you know, started our sheriff.
I got it. All right, let's pivot a little, because this is big news and we got to really dwell into this. Derrick Groves escapes from New Orleans. Everybody gets captured but him. He's considered the most dangerous. The sheriff said she's going to put her campaign on hold until he's captured. So that means her campaign's been on hold 5 months, if that's what she really meant. Employees of the DA, and I think even the DA in that jurisdiction, said they were hiding. They were so afraid. Well, it looked like they didn't really have to hide because he was here in Atlanta anyway. So what's your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, my thought well, like I said, go back to weak leadership, New Orleans. And like kind of like you said, these folks now want to be more of the inmates' friends. You know, we understand they're human. We understand that, you know, that could be any one of us. But, you know, like I say, care, custody, and control. You know, I go in every day that I do go to work. It's care, custody, and control. You know, I don't care your charges. I don't care what you've done. But, you know, it's that fine line. And now the leaderships, these new sheriffs, you know, they think they're friends with the inmates. And, you know, you asked, you know, I watched the debate she was in where she said, that, you know, they didn't escape. They was let out. You know, some jails you go to now, or the jail you ran, you know, some inmates knew what they can't do. You know, these inmates have got bold because the leadership is allowing them to get bold. And I believe if, you know, if whatever his name is, Derrick was watching, if he knew a county that didn't play, you know, a county that was tough on crime, a county that if they would have caught him, you know, like kind of folks know you don't run from GSP, you know, he didn't, you know, decide to hide out there. You know, he came right here to where his crime is rampant, you know, where he's going to go to a jail now and wait to be extradited back to New Orleans where he can have dope and phones. And he can live like he on the streets. The difference is you don't have to pay taxes. He's going to get 3 meals a day and he can store at other people's commissary, you know, but he wouldn't hide out down in, you know, Polk County, Florida, or a area that's tough on crime. So it's all what like they say, the community tolerate and what the sheriff is going to tolerate. And all those sheriffs are tolerating it. So it's going to continue to happen till people start to realize.
Wow. Out of the mouth of babes. And I'm not calling you a babe, you're a man, but you know what I'm saying, you're young.
Right.
So, you know, what's interesting to me is this. You know, the one thing that I hope that everybody gets from this is we're seeing a domino effect of what happens when you coddle criminals, when you're more concerned with protecting criminals than you are protecting the citizens or officers or whatever like that. This is all the result of that. You know, we see leaders now, they're more concerned with, hey, let's not arrest people if they smoking weed. Let's just give them a ticket. I'm not saying that in the grand scheme of things it matters, but the time spent concentrating on getting them a ticket could be spent looking for a fugitive, which we had one right here in our midst the whole time while we're trying to make it easier for people to smoke weed. And don't get me wrong, the weed is a whole nother conversation. You know, that's a whole nother conversation we'll have about whether it should be legalized or not and how it's handled. That's a whole nother conversation. But what I'm saying is when we concentrate on how to make things easier for people breaking the law, when we concentrate on, you know, whatever you want to say, hey, look, we don't think you should face the wall. We don't think you should eat Nutriloaf. We don't think you should sit in a chair. Well, at least you shouldn't sit in a chair if this guy tells you to. If the other guy tells you to, it's all right.
It's fine.
You know, and then we embolden criminals. And then this is what we get. Because if that worked, if being nice to criminals work, if saying you don't have to do this no more, you don't have to do that anymore, and we're going to have a pizza party at the jail, or we're going to have an honor dorm. That's another thing, an honor dorm. I want to get your opinion on honor dorms, and you know, because I don't believe in honor dorms. I believe all dorms should be an honor dorm.
Dorm, right?
Yeah, I had a commander one time create an honor dorm. And he took me down to see it, and I wasn't impressed because the whole jail should be that way. But you know, I gave him a little bit of leeway because it was his idea or whatever, until I found out that he had placed an inmate in an honor dorm that ran over a police officer. And I called him out on it, and I was like, okay, how we got an inmate that ran over a cop and almost killed him in an honor dorm? Right. I said, not only do I want you to take him out of there, but there's no more honor dorm. The jail is an honor dorm. I said, I want my jail so that there's 8 housing units and there's 6 sections in each one. I said, anyone should be able to come in and take a tour. And I say, pick a number 1 through 8, and then pick a number 1 through 6. And whatever they pick, when we walk in there, that's the honor dorm.
Right.
The discipline, the cleanliness, everything needs to be the same. Not just one group of inmates that they're good, they're the cleanest. Why are they good? Because what? You giving them a pizza party? Right. That's like me giving my nephew or my son, okay, I'm gonna give you some money if you do your homework. You're supposed to do your
Supposed to do
homework.
your homework, right?
Right. That's why I'm paying for a place for you to live and food to eat. That's your job. Right. I'm not gonna pay you to do something you're supposed to do. Now, if you get
Right.
straight A's, I might reward you. You know what? That's good. Let's go buy a comic book or whatever. But when you got to bribe people to do the right thing, it never works. And we see that because they brought the honor dorm back to the jail. Or it may still have one for all I know.
Yeah, they
And
do.
if that,
They
go ahead.
and they do. See, but it's better now to be in the regular housing units if you're a murderer or a big dog than it is to be in the honor dorm. You know, honor dorm, they expect you to have it clean and you can't smoke, you know, but you can. Most of these people in honor dorms are drug addicts, people that like to drink beer and other stuff. So why would I go to a dorm where I have to follow the rules where I could just go to a regular housing unit and get high, smoke, and have a smartphone?
Right.
You know, so,
And get whoever to bring you whatever you want, the pizza, the
and get
steak, or
get those.
whatever like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Right.
So
the whole jail is the whole jail, the fear, and it should be fear. You know, like you know, sort of fear to come to jail. Now it's another fear, but not for the people that are really violent criminals. They don't fear it. They don't want to run it and creating the fear for the people that need the fear. But I'm talking about fear of discipline, fear of structure. And I remember when, you know, Clayton County Jail was a place you went to get fat. You got 3 meals a day. It was safe. You know, it was clean. And you knew your people was going to make it back out. You know, now you got parents calling Clayton County Police Department that has nothing to do with the sheriff's office to literally calling the police on the sheriff because he failed to run his jail. But he's out. And you know, our state representative is even more of a joke than he is. You know, they out pictured up with him at the fall fest we have. And numerous parents have reached out to them to intervene or state investigation, you know, but they get on the news and in front of the Congress acting like they're pro-black when the people that are being victimized are black people inside this jail. So, you know, this all of it is a joke. All of it has turned into a joke upon.
So out of everywhere that Derrick Rose could have went, got the whole United States of America. Why did he come to Atlanta? That's the question I want. I mean, nobody has a straight answer, but I just want to get y'all opinion. Why did he pick Atlanta to come to and hide out at?
Criminals are welcome here. That's why. Criminals are welcome. The jails are easy for them, for his type, murderers. So that's why he picked Clayton County. That's why he picked Atlanta. That's why the rest of them pick it. That's why, you know, these 17-year-olds are being shot. That's why you send the epidemic, the YN epidemic, because it's easy. The DAs are weak here. And, you know, that's why. They're not going over.
No, they're strong when it comes to going after cops and politicians. But when it comes after
people that go against
criminals,
them.
right? Yeah.
You speak out. Like I bet you if I got booked in the Clayton County jail right now, I have to face the wall and yell sheriff on deck and everything else. Because I'm speaking out. I'm calling his bluff, you know. But the guy that's out here breaking in cars and that would even, you know, kill some of LaVon people, you know, he walk in intake, he gonna get an iPhone 16 and a shank and everything else. And even nice pictures from Sergeant Supervisor.
All right, one last question, and we're gonna get the party started. And I want to hear from both of y'all on this. This should be a lot of fun here. Okay. So we got an out of control jail in Clayton. Okay, we know Fulton has been out of control ever since I've been here. Fulton was out of control before you were born. And you haven't heard a lot. There's been a few things about the cab recently, some deaths. It wasn't murder or whatever, but I know for a fact because I know people who were there. That's a crazy jail too. So we got 3 out of control jails. Fulton used to be the worst. Now it looks like Clayton County is number 1. Everybody claims, well, I can't put this on the sheriff of DeKalb. I haven't heard her say anything one way or another about this. But everybody says, well, it's manpower. Even the sheriff of New Orleans said there's not enough people in there. Okay. We know in Clayton, and we ain't got to get into that right now. It's another time. We know that's not true there because he actually got more manpower than I had. It's just that he has not put them in a jail. Okay. But let's just play the game, and let's just say that manpower is an issue. What do y'all think about asking for help for the National Guard to come in until the jails get under control? 7 people killed at Clayton County Jail. An officer just stabbed at the Fulton County Jail. We hear the stories you've told us that there are times there's only been 3 people manning the jail. What about bringing the National Guard to help with that? I want to hear what y'all got to say, and then before I say what I got to say, go ahead.
Well, I think I mean, if it's the same leadership, there's no point. It's just more people watching. More people watching watching it. You know, now if the leader is different, if it's somebody that's tough and no nonsense, I think it'll change. You know, I think if I was leading the National Guard, it'd be fixed in 4 weeks, Clayton County at least. So it depends on the leadership. You know, I know for a fact Clayton County has the people. If they didn't have it, then the deputies on the road would be in there. So I think it wouldn't matter with the leadership who you bring in.
Jerome,
if you cuff those people, they won't be able to do nothing.
Yeah, Jerome.
I'm going to I'm going to answer these questions in succession, starting with one of the points that you made up in regards to how was he able to, Derrick Rose was able to get into Atlanta and so on and so forth. You all watched James Bond, right?
Of course.
And you haven't seen a black James Bond. Why?
Because it's England.
Well, you know, you don't see a black James Bond because most of the people that are running in those movies are white. You're not going to go ahead and get a contrast like that. You're going to assimilate in big population centers where the demographics meets what you look like. That's exactly why he comes to Atlanta on that end of it. I think that we should get that point out of the way. Structurally and operationally, we're talking about weakness in the jail, right? So, I mean, there is no doubt that, you know, it doesn't really matter about the understaffed portion of what you have in the jail. It really matters about, you know, the systemic and also the strength of leadership and also the leaders underneath them. You can be a strong sheriff. You can be a strong police commissioner and so on and so forth. But if the command underneath you or it is weak and weary, you know, the foundation breaks apart. You got to, as a strong leader, you separate those people. You did something like that, Keith, in the early 2000s. So that's how you take care of rot. You don't let the rot stay. Here in Florida, we have houses all over the place that is by the sea. That sea salt sprays onto homes. And guess what you have to do? You have to fortify that house often. If you don't, then you have the Champagne Towers collapse, as we saw 3 years ago, and killed all those people in Surfside. In addition to that, the National Guard coming in, the rules of engagement for the National Guard as opposed to civilians. And when I talk about civilians, I'm talking about us that wore the badge. It's a little bit different. So you would have to go ahead and give some liberties to them so they could be effective. Could they post up and make sure that certain crimes doesn't exist? Sure. But Mike is telling the truth about this part of it. If the head is rotten, you're going to have the whole structure just collapse underneath itself exactly when the National Guard leaves. Does it take care of a temporary hole? Sure. But the problem is what you want to do is fortify it for years and weeks to come. It's hard to do when you have weak leadership. And those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think y'all both got valid points. I can tell you this. I hope it happens. I know it's only temporary. I think it's something that, and I think you're right. You put them in there and they stop the problem there. But if they leave and the same guy is there, it's going to decay again. It's probably something that needs to happen when a new leader comes in and maybe he could request the help. There's enough people to watch it. You know, when you see guys digging holes through the wall, like at Fulton County, making shanks. A lot of this because they're unsupervised. First of all, you remove all the stuff that they can make it from, but the stuff you can't move, how do you have that much time to shave something into a shank, or get a hole in a wall so that you can get drugs in? It's because you're not being monitored, or either the people who are monitoring you are looking the other way. So if there was enough manpower to stand in there just to take the jail back under control, and then once everything is sealed, once the locks are fixed, once you're able to replace them with personnel, meaning, of course the National Guard can't stay forever, but let's say they were there long enough to get it under control, long enough for someone to come in and say, okay, let's get rid of all of the girlfriends and hire some real officers. Okay, now you get in the jail you're supposed to be. Now it's safe and secure. Now there's enough people where they need to be. I think that could solve the problem. I think, unfortunately, those jails, Fulton and Clayton, are at the point to where if there's someone that's going to do what it takes to clean it up, they probably could use that help. Of course, that help can never be permanent, but they need that help just to get control of it, if that makes sense.
Right.
So, but of course, unfortunately, there's a lot of weird leaders out there, and a lot of them are here in Atlanta, and a lot of them they would fight it. No, we don't need them here. We don't need this, and that's easy to say when you don't have a son or a daughter in there, and you're worried if they're gonna die or not. But every place that they've been, just about, there was someone saying we don't need the help, and I wouldn't listen when I was there. Even though I had crime under control, I would have still took it, because okay, good, we can get it further under control. If we got the crime down to a certain level, let's get it down even further. That's less people dying, less people getting robbed. So even when I had the county under control, I could think of some places where if that was offered to me, yeah, go stand right over there, because that's the area I was going to hit next anyway.
Yeah. Let me answer this question for I think Rodeo or Die. What can we do? Can we call an emergency something and impeach him? The answer in short is no. But I believe Georgia does have something where you can go ahead and do a recall election. It takes a lot, and usually is built on some type of malfeasance. And malfeasance could also, the word in itself, you would have to go ahead and understand there's several elements in there. One of them is, of course, the unlawfulness portion of it. But the other part of that is the unethical portion of that. And, if you are in that county, certainly you can go ahead and start that process going, because it does fit the elements of malfeasance. If all this stuff that is going on and then some, very true, you do have a great case for that. So just wanted to go ahead and explain what that looks like for members who've asked about that.
Another thing you can do for the parents, especially for the inmate, is understand the inmates' rights. Understand what they can and can't do. So, the DA didn't try to bring an issue on, Sheriff Hill putting violent offenders or in these chairs. Which if it was a problem, if you go look at these cameras, the guy standing right next to him was Levon, which is not, but it was only a problem because who it was. But with the chair, they also said, with the cell, which the rules actually make it clear with the cells, it doesn't make it with the chair, where, just because somebody retaliating or because I don't like this person or because of whatever, I can't just go stick him in a cell for 23 hours a day. As a punishment, that's not a facility violation, protective custody, or medical isolation. So your son speaks out, or you speaks out to the news, and your son is put into 23 hours a day and he's not a sentenced inmate, you can't do it. So, the state attorney's office, you can try and take, that info up there if you can prove it, but just fail them to release these public records. And, he acknowledged it. So we're going to see what Chris Carr would do about it. So call the state attorney's office, call your state representatives and your county commissioners, or go to the county commission meetings and see and bring attention, the news to it. But Chris Carr, that, you know, the violation, or you can't just stick somebody in the cell because you retaliating, you know, and all that, everything at the sheriff's department is open record. The body cameras, the disciplinary report. Send the email, ask for public records. Him refusing to answer those, he must have a public records coordinator specifically assigned to answering public records, and he doesn't have it. So email Chris Carr, your state attorney general.
Let me say this in conclusion, because we need to wrap this up. But it's interesting you should bring it up about the chair, about him standing there, about 23-hour lockdown as punishment or whatever. You know, jails have used 23-hour lockdown for as long as I know. So, you know, it depends on who prosecutors. A lot of people got to understand this about prosecutors. And that's why we've got to be so careful who we elect as prosecutors. And then sometimes we don't elect them. We end up with a dummy like we got in Clayton, who was appointed and no one ran against her. So she's just been there. But when they play with the law and all of a sudden they come up with new theories that no one's heard of before, and they take tools away from officers just so they could do a prosecution, this is what we end up with here. All of the tools that the Clayton County Jail had to keep people in check, violent people, those were 3 ways, non-violent ways to control violent people. One is 23-hour lockdown, others neutral oath, others a restraint chair. And when those 3 things was in place, we didn't have any murders, we didn't have drugs, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have stabbings, we didn't have gang rapes, we didn't have overdose. So very important for us to know, especially when we look at this next DA's election. Really, that's the fool we need to probably be looking at before we look at as you call him, Levanka. When you got prosecutors that go out and they get involved in stuff like this for political reasons, look at the reciprocal effect of what's happened. You're telling these officers at the Clayton County Jail they can't use 23-hour lockdown. They can't use a restraint chair. They can't use this. So you're making life better for violent criminals. Now officers are getting feces thrown on them. They're getting urine thrown on them. Inmates are getting sexually assaulted, gang raped, or whatever. All because of a process. And every time they get involved in something, they screw it up. When they got involved with the school system and they got hard on teachers, the bad kids took over the schools. And now teachers and everyone. As a matter of fact, Clayton County, this is something else we got to talk about. The enrollment rate has dropped. And when I've talked to people about it, there's 2 reasons why. They're either afraid for their kids to go to the school, or they think that the kids can't learn to read and write there. I don't know how true that part is. I mean, I know the chairman of the board for the last few years we had, I think they finally voted her out. She probably couldn't read and write herself. But I want you to think about the control that's given to schools, when given to the bad kids, when you take away discipline and teachers' ability to discipline them, and the teachers are afraid they're going to get locked up. That comes from having crazy prosecutors like the one we got in the DA, who indicted 2 coaches for murder on an accidental track theft. And then we got to even look at what happened in the homes when they started locking up parents for corporal punishment. We know the difference between abuse and corporal punishment. We know you shouldn't be killing your kids or something. But once the 3 major systems, parents afraid to discipline, teachers afraid to discipline, now the correctional officers have no tool to discipline the police. And this is the chaos we get. And unfortunately, in Georgia, most of that chaos is concentrated in the 5th Congressional District.
Right.
And not to throw in a campaign ad, but that's why I'm running. Thanks for coming and seeing us. Jerome, I'm going to let you close it out. Mike, it's always an honor to have the future here with us. Always good to hear from you. I think y'all teach us more now than we teach y'all. but Jerome, go ahead and finish out, Jerome.
I was looking at the analytics. Most of y'all gave us a whole bunch of love on Sunday and certainly today. But the analytics still shows about 70% of you do not subscribe. Please subscribe so we can keep on bringing this content out to you. Subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can go ahead and get our next episode as it comes around. Like and comment about today. We're going to keep on doing this each and every time, because once again, these are matters and discussions that can save somebody's life. And I think that we all have a responsibility that's here, and also you that are behind looking at this on television, mobile, or even on your laptop that can help assist with this. Without further ado, we're going to land this plane and we'll talk to you guys later.
All right. Strengthen